Racing driver Matthias Lauda tests the Aston Martin Vanquish for us today. The Bond car from the film Die Another Day is alluring for its individuality and handcrafting. But how is its driving performance on the racetrack? The sound is right. The Vanquish delivers a furious tempest of sound. The 12 cylinders and almost 6 litres capacity produces 460 horsepower, which pushes the 2-ton vehicle from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. In terms of handling, it's a heavy craft, but it's still fun to drive it at the limits. The thrust is powerful, especially in the area of highest torque. Nonetheless, the Vanquish is more of a Gran Turismo than a racing car. The bodywork, masterfully designed by Ian Callum, captivates with its perfect proportions and strict discipline, dispensing with machismo as much as with attention-seeking lettering. And what does Matthias Lauda think about the British understatement? I personally like this car an insane amount, especially the design. I think it's one of the best-looking cars currently on the market, because it's very wide and very brawny, and also has a really wide tail. So I really love the design a lot. In the cockpit, the superbly shaped leather seats are a delight. It's less pleasing that there are no instruments to measure oil pressure and temperature, which should be obligatory in a sports car of this caliber. The plastic lever and switches also seem out of place in the premium surroundings. The cockpit is actually quite okay. The steering wheel is a bit too thick for me. In reverse gear it's a bit cumbersome. You have to push the button here now and again until it's finally in gear. But the positive thing about this car is, of course, the sound that it has. Let's start it up. What bothers me a bit about this car is that the leather workmanship could be a bit better. And what I don't understand is why an Aston Martin has buttons from a normal Ford, for example, with these controls here. This is the V12 engine. As you can see, the engine is really big, and yet that makes the car a bit sluggish. The engine is lacking some torque at low revs for me, because at low revs it's not very lively. The Aston has 542 Newton-meters of torque, though not until 5,000 revs. But the top speed is 306 kilometers an hour, and it has Formula One-style gear paddles. The car isn't bad with changing gears. You can change with gear paddles like in a Formula One car. What I like is that it double clutches when changing down. It does it very cleanly and gently.
Was mir aber gefällt beim Runterschalten ist, dass mit Zwischengas die Gänge runterschaltet. Das macht es sehr sauber und sanft.
When changing up, you can feel a little bit of a jolt. That could be done better, in my opinion.
Besser machen, meiner Meinung nach.
I feel that the gears are a little bit too long. But you can drive the Vanquish at up to 7,000 revs, and that with a V12 aspirated engine. You should experience this inferno at least once. It takes a while to reach this car's limits, but due to the lack of ESP, you then need keen reflexes. About the steering, I would say it's a little too soft for me, and you don't really have the right feel in corners because the steering is a bit too spongy. It reminds me more of a normal car. The steering could give more feedback. The Vanquish conveys one thing above all: I am a very, very heavy car. Normally with a car like this you need steering that's somewhat more direct and hard, where you have more feeling when driving. That only applies to the racetrack, however. In normal use, the steering presents no problems.
Fahrverhalten
Although I always thought it was a sports car, in my opinion, the handling's a bit too sluggish and soft for the racetrack.
für die Rennstrecke.
The Vanquish is a Gran Turismo in which you can go on a very comfortable and very powerful Grand Tour. On wet roads, however, caution and gentle use of its power is required. On wet roads, you notice that the car weighs a great deal. When braking and in corners, you can tell that the car is a real tanker.
Richtiger Tanker ist.
To summarize this car, I'd say it's very nice, but not quite suited to the racetrack because it's simply far too heavy and far too sluggish. The engine doesn't really have good thrust at low revs, and the gears are a little too long for me. So it's a really lovely car, but not really suited to the racetrack. Well, don't forget that Matthias Lauder is used to super direct and agile racing cars. We think that the Vanquish offers real understatement, aside from the Ford Mondeo buttons, perhaps.